The air in the conference room was stale, recycled through vents that hummed a monotonous tune of corporate indifference. I sat there, a ghost in a gray suit. My spine so straight it ached. Across the polished mahogany table, David Miller, a kid barely 5 years out of college, was soaking in the praise like a dry sponge. He was being promoted to senior project lead, the very position I had been bleeding for over the past 3 years. My boss, a man named Mark, who had a knack for saying everything and nothing at the same time, was beaming. David's fresh perspective and go-getter attitude are exactly what this team needs to push into the next quarter, he announced to the room. His eyes briefly flicked to me, a flicker of something that might have been pity, but was probably just indigestion. And of course, we have to thank Caden for his years of steady dedication, a real rock for the team. A rock. That's what I was. Something you could count on to be there, to hold things up, to be sturdy and unremarkable, something you eventually took for granted and never thought to polish or display. The words were meant to be a balm, but they felt like sandpaper on raw skin. I had mentored David. I had stayed late countless nights cleaning up his overambitious, sloppily executed projects. I had laid the foundation, brick by painstaking brick, and he was being handed the keys to the penthouse. The meeting droned on. I nodded in all the right places. My face a carefully constructed mask of professional support. Inside, a bitter cocktail of rage and humiliation was brewing, hot and acidic in my gut. I could feel the familiar sting behind my eyes, the one I'd perfected suppressing since I was a boy. Men don't cry. Caden, especially not over a job. When the meeting finally adjourned, the room erupted in a chorus of congratulations for David. He lapped it up, his smile wide and guileless. He even had the audacity to clap me on the shoulder as he passed. "Hey man, thanks for everything. I couldn't have done it without you. You earned it, kid," I managed to choke out, the words tasting like ash. I gathered my notebook and pen, my movements slow and deliberate. Each step back to my cubicle felt like walking through wet cement. The fluorescent lights of the office seemed to mock me, illuminating every line of exhaustion on my face, every fleck of gray in my hair. I was 38 years old, and I had just been rendered obsolete by a 27-year-old with a better smile and a louder voice. My hard work, my expertise, my loyalty, it all amounted to a pat on the head and being called a rock. Back at my desk, I stared at the screen, the project timelines and spreadsheets blurring into an incomprehensible mess. The anger wasn't fading, it was simmering, evolving into something sharper, something more desperate. I had played by the rules. I had been the good soldier, the dependable employee, the man everyone could count on. And for what? To be a footnote in someone else's success story. The frustration was so thick in my throat I could barely breathe. Something had to give. I just had no idea what it would be. That night, my apartment was a tomb. The silence was only broken by the clink of a whiskey bottle against a glass and the low hum of the refrigerator. I was 3 glasses deep, the amber liquid doing little to numb the throbbing wound in my pride. It only seemed to sharpen the edges of my resentment. I slumped onto the couch, the worn fabric groaning under my weight. My laptop was open on the coffee table, a glowing portal to my professional failures. On the screen was my resume, a document I had meticulously curated over 15 years. It was a testament to my life as Caden Miller reliable, experienced, technically proficient, and, apparently, completely invisible. With a surge of drunken, self-destructive energy, I opened a new document. The cursor blinked on the blank page. A tiny, rhythmic pulse of possibility. What if I wasn't Caden? Who would I be then? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It started as a joke, a way to vent the poison churning inside me. I typed a new name. I didn't think about it. Just let my fingers move. Rosalie. It sounded elegant, soft. I needed a last name, something that felt a little different, a little exotic, but not so much that it would be out of place. Chen. Rosalie Chen. I stared at the name. It looked right. A strange hum vibrated through me, a frequency I'd never felt before. It was as if the name itself had a personality, a presence, fueled by whiskey and a profound sense of what the hell. I started writing. I didn't just copy my old resume. I began to translate it. Managed cross-functional teams became cultivated collaborative environments and mentored emerging talent. Executed project directives became spearheaded innovative solutions from conception to launch. The language was different. It was more confident, more graceful. It was the work of Caden, but the voice was Rosalie's. I found a stock photo online, a woman with intelligent eyes and a subtle, knowing smile. She looked competent and stylish, the kind of person you listened to when she spoke. I pasted her picture at the top of the resume. For hours, I worked on this fiction, this creation born of despair. I poured all my skills, all my achievements, into this new vessel. I gave Rosalie my experience, but draped it in a charisma I never felt I possessed. I highlighted my communication skills, my attention to detail, my ability to mediate conflicts, the so-called soft skills that were always undervalued when they came from a quiet, unassuming guy like me. When I was done, I leaned back, my head spinning from the alcohol and the sheer audacity of what I'd done. I read the document from top to bottom. It was perfect. This Rosalie Chen was a powerhouse. She was everything I was, but in a package the world seemed to want more. A wave of shame washed over me. This was insane, a stupid, drunken fantasy. I reached for the delete key, ready to erase this whole pathetic episode, but my hand stopped. I looked at the name again. Rosalie Chen. A strange vibration went through my chest. It wasn't just a name on a page anymore. It felt like a key. For the first time all day, a tiny, dangerous spark of hope flickered to life in the darkness. What if I just sent it out? What was the worst that could happen? I was already at rock bottom. With a reckless click, I uploaded the resume to a job board and hit submit on an application for a project manager position at a hot new company called Innovate Tech. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a stupid, impulsive, career suicide mission. But as I closed the laptop, a small, defiant smile touched my lips. For the first time in a very long time. I had no idea what was going to happen next, and it was terrifyingly, wonderfully exhilarating. The email from Innovate Tech arrived 2 days later. Dear Ms. Chen, it began. We were very impressed with your resume and would like to schedule an interview. I read it 3 times, my blood turning to ice water. The drunken joke had just become terrifyingly real. My first instinct was to panic, to write back and say it was all a mistake. But the spark from the other night, that tiny ember of rebellion, hadn't completely died out. It flared, whispering a dangerous question. Could you actually do this? The question followed me out of my apartment and into the overwhelming, brightly lit aisles of a drugstore. I had never felt so out of place in my life. I walked through the cosmetics section like a spy in a foreign country, my eyes darting around, terrified of being seen. The sheer number of products was staggering. Foundations, concealers, powders, eyeliners, mascaras, lipsticks in 1,000 shades of red and pink. With my phone clutched in my hand, I furtively watched a dozen beginner makeup tutorials on YouTube, trying to commit the steps to memory. I grabbed a basket and started filling it with the basics: a medium coverage foundation, a simple black eyeliner pencil, a tube of mascara, and a lipstick in a muted, professional-looking shade of dusty rose. Each item I dropped into the basket felt like a small, irreversible crime. My hands were sweating by the time I got to the checkout counter. The teenage girl at the register didn't even blink. But I felt like my skin was on fire, certain she could see right through my charade. Back in the safety of my bathroom, I laid out my purchases like surgical tools. The first attempt was a disaster. I squeezed out way too much foundation, smearing it across my face until I looked like I was wearing a lumpy beige mask. The eyeliner was even worse. I tried to draw a thin, simple line along my upper eyelid, but my hand trembled, leaving a jagged, thick smudge that made me look like a raccoon. I wiped it all off, my face raw and red, and tried again and again. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to get the hang of it. I learned how to blend the foundation so it evened out my skin tone without looking like paint. I learned that small, light strokes with the eyeliner pencil were the key. The mascara wand felt alien in my hand, but after a few pokes in the eye, I managed to darken my lashes. Finally, the lipstick. As I twisted the tube and the color rose, my heart did a strange little flip. I carefully applied it, following the natural line of my lips. When I was done, I stared at my reflection. It was still me, but it wasn't. The angles of my face were softened. My eyes, framed by the dark liner and mascara, looked larger, more expressive. The hint of color on my lips made my whole face seem more alive. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Shame, fear, but also a dizzying, undeniable thrill. This person in the mirror was a stranger, but a fascinating one. This was Rosalie, starting to take shape. Next came the voice. I spent hours alone in my apartment, talking to myself. I listened to female news anchors, podcasters, and audiobook narrators, paying attention to their pitch, their cadence, their intonation. My first attempts were comical. I tried to raise my voice to a high pitch, and it came out as a squeaky, strained falsetto that was painful to hear. It sounded fake, ridiculous. Frustration set in. This was impossible. But then I remembered one of the tutorials mentioning that it wasn't about being high-pitched. It was about speaking from a different place, more in the head and less in the chest. I closed my eyes and focused. I tried to find a resonance higher up in my sinuses. I started with simple phrases. Hello, my name is Rosalie Chen. It's a pleasure to meet you. It was still clumsy, but slowly, a new voice began to emerge. It was softer, lighter than my normal speaking voice, with a slightly higher, more melodic register. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't sound like a caricature anymore. It sounded plausible. I practiced for hours until my throat was raw, repeating phrases, reading news articles aloud, trying to make the voice feel less like an act and more like a part of me. Each night, I'd go through the ritual, the careful application of makeup, the quiet voice training. Shame and excitement were my constant companions. The Caden part of me was screaming that I was a freak, a fraud. But the emerging Rosalie felt a strange sense of rightness in it all. It was like I was sculpting myself, creating a person I had never allowed myself to be. And the more I saw her in the mirror, the more I heard her in my voice, the more I wanted to see if she could actually exist outside the four walls of my apartment. The interview was scheduled for a Friday. I decided that Thursday would be the day for a trial run. I couldn't let the first time Rosalie walked in the world be on her way into a make-or-break job interview. I needed to know if I could pass, or if I would fall apart at the first strange look from a stranger. Getting dressed was an ordeal. I had ordered a few things online, a simple navy blue pencil skirt, a cream-colored silk blouse, a pair of sensible black pumps with a low, 2-inch heel, and a long light gray trench coat. The coat was my security blanket. My shield. It covered most of my frame, making the outfit feel less conspicuous. The clothes felt bizarre against my skin. The silk of the blouse was soft and cool, a stark contrast to the starchy cotton of my usual work shirts. The skirt was snug around my waist and hips, a constant, restrictive presence. But the shoes were instruments of torture. The moment I stood up in them, my weight shifted forward. My calves screamed in protest, and my heels felt like they were being squeezed in a vise. I took a few wobbly steps around my apartment. It was like learning to walk all over again. I felt clumsy, top-heavy, and utterly ridiculous. How did women do this every day I practiced walking back and forth, from my living room to my kitchen, trying to find a rhythm, a sense of balance? It was slow going, but eventually, I could move without looking like a baby deer on ice. After applying my makeup with more care than ever before, and putting on a simple, shoulder-length brown wig I'd ordered, I took a deep, shaky breath and looked in the full-length mirror. The person looking back was convincing. The trench coat helped. The low heels weren't too outrageous. If you didn't look too closely at my jawline or my hands, you might just believe it. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of pure terror. This was it. I grabbed my purse, another strange, new accessory, and walked out the door. The city street was an assault on the senses. The noise of the traffic, the chatter of people, the smells from a nearby hot dog stand. It was all amplified. Every sense was on high alert. I felt like every single person on the sidewalk was staring at me, their eyes burning into my back. I kept my head down, focusing on the simple, agonizing task of walking in those damn shoes. Left foot, right foot. Don't trip. Don't look up. The heels made a soft, clicking sound on the pavement with each step. It was a distinctly feminine sound, and it was both terrifying and electrifying. It was the sound of Rosalie. I was making my way down the block, my steps small and tentative, when a man walking towards me on the sidewalk met my eyes. It was just a glance, a fleeting, casual look that lasted no more than a second. He wasn't staring or leering. He just looked at me the way you look at any other anonymous person passing you on the street. And then he looked away. But for me, that simple, meaningless glance was a thunderclap. He had looked at Rosalie, and he had seen a woman. He hadn't seen a man in a wig and a skirt. He hadn't seen a fraud. He had just seen a woman walking down the street. A jolt went through me, a dizzying mix of pure, unadulterated fear and a bizarre, thrilling sense of validation. I was invisible and visible at the same time. I was just another face in the crowd. And in that anonymity, Rosalie became real. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But now it was mixed with something else, a strange, powerful sense of allure. I had stepped out onto the stage, and for one brief moment, the audience had believed the performance. I made it 2 blocks before my nerve broke, and I practically ran back to my apartment, my ankles screaming. But as I slammed the door behind me and leaned against it, my body trembling, I knew I could do it. Rosalie was ready for her interview. The lobby of Innovate Tech was all glass, steel, and minimalist furniture. It hummed with a quiet, confident energy that was both intimidating and exciting. As I walked towards the reception desk, the click of my heels on the polished concrete floor sounded deafeningly loud to my own ears. I was certain that every head in the open-plan office would turn to stare, to dissect and expose me, but no one did. They were all absorbed in their work, bathed in the blue glow of their monitors. "Hi, I'm Rosalie Chen. I have a 10 o'clock interview with Marissa Jacobs," I said to the receptionist, my practiced voice coming out a little breathier than I intended. "Of course, Ms. Chen. Have a seat. She'll be right with you," the young man said with a polite, professional smile, his eyes never betraying a hint of suspicion. I sat on a sleek, uncomfortable-looking leather couch, placing my purse primly on my lap. My heart felt like a trapped bird, beating frantically against the cage of my ribs. This was it, the point of no return. I smoothed down my skirt for the 10th time, my palms slick with sweat. I could feel the synthetic fibers of the wig on my neck, the unfamiliar weight of mascara on my lashes, the binding pressure of the skirt around my waist. Every physical sensation was a screaming reminder of the lie I was telling. A few minutes later, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a warm smile emerged from a hallway. She was dressed in a stylish but professional pantsuit. "Rosalie, hi. I'm Marissa Jacobs. It's so great to finally meet you in person." We shook hands. Her grip was firm, confident. "It's a pleasure to meet you too," I replied, my voice holding steady. She led me into a conference room with a glass wall overlooking the city. As we sat down, I felt a strange sense of calm begin to settle over my nerves. The terror was still there, lurking just beneath the surface. But something else was taking over focus. I knew this material. This was my career, my expertise. The packaging was different, but the product was the same. The interview began with the usual questions about my experience and skills. And as I started talking about project management methodologies, budget forecasting, and team leadership, a remarkable thing happened. Caden's knowledge and Rosalie's persona began to merge. I found myself speaking with a confidence I rarely felt as Caden. I wasn't just listing my accomplishments. I was framing them as part of a narrative of growth and innovation. The soft skills I had always downplayed suddenly became my greatest assets. I talked about diffusing team conflicts, mentoring junior members, and fostering a creative and supportive work environment. These were all things Caden had done. But Rosalie spoke about them with an emotional intelligence and a persuasive charm that Caden could never muster. Marissa Jacobs was an excellent interviewer. She listened intently, her gaze sharp and analytical, but also encouraging. She didn't just ask about what I had done. She asked about how I had done it, about my thought process, about the people involved. "Your resume is impressive, Rosalie," she said, leaning forward slightly. "Technically, you're more than qualified, but what really stands out is your emphasis on the human element of project management. It's something a lot of candidates overlook." "I believe a project is only as strong as its team," I heard Rosalie say, the words flowing naturally. "You can have the best plan in the world, but if your team isn't motivated and communicating effectively, You're just setting yourself up for failure." I could see a flicker of genuine interest in her eyes. The combination was working. The solid, unimpeachable technical skills of Caden were being delivered with the confident, graceful presentation of Rosalie. It was a potent mix. I was selling my own expertise, but in a package that seemed to be far more appealing. As the interview wrapped up, Marissa smiled. "Well, this has been a real pleasure. Rosalie, you've given us a lot to think about. We're interviewing a few other candidates, but we'll definitely be in touch soon." Walking out of the Innovate Tech building and back into the anonymity of the city, I felt completely drained, but also strangely electrified. My ankles ached, my head pounded from the stress, and my face felt stiff under the layer of makeup. But underneath it all was a profound sense of accomplishment. I had done it. I had walked into a high-stakes situation as Rosalie Chen, and I had succeeded. The lie had held. The terrifying part was that, for that 1 hour in that conference room, it hadn't felt entirely like a lie at all. The job offer came the following Tuesday. I stared at the email for a full 10 minutes, a roaring in my ears. They wanted me. They wanted Rosalie. A wave of euphoria washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy, followed immediately by a cold, crushing wave of panic. Now I had to do this every day. This wasn't a one-time performance anymore. It was a long-running show, and I was the only cast member. My first day was a blur of introductions, paperwork, and overwhelming anxiety. Waking up 2 hours early to go through the transformation process was grueling. Shaving had to be perfect, the makeup meticulously applied, the wig secured just right. As I sat in my car in the Innovate Tech parking lot, I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Rosalie looked back, poised and professional, but I could see the fear in my eyes. Walking into the office felt different this time. It wasn't a temporary visit, it was my new reality. Marissa gave me a tour and introduced me to my team. Everyone was friendly, welcoming. "This is Rosalie Chen, our new project manager." They smiled, shook my hand, and said, "Welcome to the team, Rosalie." Each time they said her name, it was a little shock to my system, a reminder of the high-wire act I was performing. My new desk was in an open-plan area. As I sat down, I became acutely aware of everything. Under the table, my legs were pressed together, the nylon of my stockings smooth against my skin. I could feel the gentle click of my heels against the leg of the chair as I adjusted my position. The movements felt deliberate, studied. I was constantly monitoring myself sit up straight. Don't slouch. Keep your knees together. It was exhausting. The most surreal moment came during the morning team meeting. I sat in the same kind of conference room where my old life had imploded. But everything was different. I was the one being introduced as a key new player. When I spoke, offering a preliminary thought on a project timeline, people listened. They looked at me, at Rosalie, and nodded thoughtfully. Later, back at my desk, I took a sip from the mug of coffee someone had kindly made for me. I saw the perfect, faint crescent of dusty rose lipstick left on the white ceramic rim. I stared at it for a long second. It was such a small, feminine thing. A simple, mundane detail from a life I was now inhabiting. It was proof. A tiny, terrifying, and exhilarating confirmation that in this office, in this new life, I was Rosalie. The pride I felt was quickly followed by a pang of loneliness. This new person was succeeding, but the person who had earned it, the one who had put in all the years of work, was nowhere to be seen. Caden was hidden away, the secret engine running the whole machine, and I had a sinking feeling that he was going to be very, very lonely. The first few weeks were a tightrope walk. Every morning was the ritual of transformation. Every evening was the ritual of erasure. Wiping away Rosalie until Caden stared back from the mirror, looking more tired and more lost each day. The contrast was jarring. Rosalie's life was exciting. She was good at her job. Her suggestions in meetings were met with enthusiasm, her organizational skills praised. Caden's life was a silent, empty apartment, a microwave dinner, and the crushing weight of his secret. It was during my second week that I met Aisha. She worked in the marketing department, and her desk was near mine. She had a bright, infectious laugh and a habit of talking with her hands. One afternoon, she rolled her chair over to my desk. "Okay, I have to ask," she said, her brown eyes sparkling with mischief. "Where do you get your blouses? Your work fashion game is seriously on point." I froze. It was the first time someone had commented on my appearance with such casual, friendly intimacy. All my clothes had been ordered online in a panic, chosen for their ability to look professional and nondescript. "Oh, just online, really," I stammered, my practiced Rosalie voice wavering for a second. "No place special." "Well, you're making it look special," she said with a grin. "I'm Aisha. By the way, sorry, I know we were introduced in that big group thing, but I wanted to say hi properly." "Rosalie," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more natural than I expected. "It's nice to meet you properly, too." From that day on, Aisha became my first friend at Innovate Tech, and my first friend as Rosalie. She would stop by my desk to chat. We'd grab coffee from the break room together, and she'd complain about her impossible marketing deadlines, while I'd lament the complexities of software development cycles. It was normal. It was easy. Too easy. I found myself looking forward to her daily visits, to the sound of her laugh. She was warm and genuine, and for the first time, I felt a connection with someone that wasn't based on a professional transaction. But every pleasant conversation was tinged with a deep, sickening guilt. This friendship was built on a lie. Aisha was friends with Rosalie, a person who didn't really exist. One Friday, she invited me to go out for drinks with a few other colleagues after work. "Come on, it'll be fun. You need to de-stress," she insisted. Panic seized me. Outside the structured, professional environment of the office. In a bar, with lower lighting and casual conversation, the risks were 100 times higher. What if the wig slipped? What if my voice dropped after a drink or two? "I can't," I said, the excuse already forming. "I have, plans." Aisha's face fell just a little. "Oh, okay, well, next time then." As I watched her walk away, a profound sense of isolation washed over me. I was succeeding as Rosalie, but I was building a wall around her, a wall that kept everyone, especially people I was starting to genuinely like, at a distance. The warmth of her friendship felt like a ray of sunshine that I couldn't let get too close, for fear it would melt the wax holding my carefully constructed wings together. And that was the cruelest irony of all in becoming someone more likable. I had made it impossible to let anyone truly get to know me. The double life began to take its toll. The line between Caden and Rosalie, which had at first seemed so distinct, started to blur in unsettling ways. At my apartment, alone as Caden, I'd find myself catching a reflection in the darkened TV screen and being surprised by the unfamiliar, masculine face staring back. I'd reach up to tuck a non-existent strand of hair behind my ear or feel a phantom sensation of a skirt against my legs. Conversely, at work, moments of Caden would threaten to break through. I'd almost answer a question in my deeper, natural voice, catching myself just in time and turning it into a cough. I'd start to manspread slightly in my chair before remembering to primly cross my legs at the ankle. Each of these near misses sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through me, leaving me shaky and rattled. Sleep became a luxury. Most nights, I'd lie awake, my mind racing. I'd dissect every conversation from the day, every glance, every interaction, searching for signs of suspicion. Did anyone notice how I never talked about my weekend or my past? My backstory for Rosalie was a flimsy, vague construction. Grew up in a different state, no family nearby, focused on her career. It was a story full of holes, and I lived in constant fear that someone would start poking at them. The worst part was the loneliness. Rosalie was surrounded by friendly colleagues. She was respected. She was included. She was even admired. But Caden was utterly alone. He was the stagehand, the puppeteer, the man behind the curtain. Rosalie got to take the bows, but Caden was the one who went home to the silent apartment, the one who bore the weight of the deception. One night, after a particularly good day at the office where my team had celebrated a major project milestone, the contrast was unbearable. Rosalie had been the center of attention, praised for her leadership. I came home, and the silence of my apartment was deafening. I went into the bathroom and began the process of removing Rosalie. I peeled off the false eyelashes, watching them come away like tiny, delicate insects. I scrubbed my face with a makeup wipe, watching the foundation, the eyeliner, the lipstick smear and vanish onto the cloth, revealing the tired, pale skin of the man beneath. Finally, I unpinned the wig, and my own short, unremarkable hair was exposed. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. Caden, the man with the sad eyes and the faint stubble already beginning to show. But tonight, he looked more like a stranger than Rosalie had. I had spent so much time and energy creating her, embodying her, that my own identity was starting to feel like the costume. A question, raw and terrifying, surfaced from the depths of my confusion. It wasn't just, who am I pretending to be anymore? It was much, much scarier. I looked into my own eyes in the mirror and whispered it into the empty room. Who am I? Really, there was no answer. There was only the exhausted face of a man playing a part, and the ghost of a woman who was starting to feel more real than he was. The price of the secret wasn't just the fear of being caught. It was the slow, terrifying erosion of my own self. About 3 months into my tenure at Innovate Tech, a crisis erupted. A major client, a huge source of revenue, was unhappy with the progress on their flagship project. The current project lead was buckling under the pressure, and the whole thing was on the verge of collapsing. In a tense, all-hands meeting, Mark, the division head, was looking for a solution. "We need someone to step in and turn this around. Someone with a fresh perspective and a firm hand," he declared, his eyes scanning the room. A year ago, Caden would have kept his head down, done the work, and waited to be asked. Rosalie was different, before I even consciously decided to. I felt my hand go up. "I can do it," I said, my voice clear and steady. The entire room turned to look at me. It was a massive gamble. If I failed, my career at Innovate Tech, Rosalie's career, would be over. Mark looked surprised, then intrigued. He glanced at Marissa Jacobs, who gave a subtle, encouraging nod. "All right, Chen," Mark said. "It's yours. Don't make me regret this." The next few weeks were a blur of relentless work. I dove into the project, working 12, sometimes 14-hour days. I untangled the mess of miscommunication, reorganized the workflow, and established clear, achievable milestones. I wasn't just managing the project, I was leading the team. I stayed late with the developers, ordered pizza, and listened to their frustrations. I acted as a buffer between them and the demanding client, translating corporate pressure into actionable tasks. This was where Caden's years of experience shone. I knew the technical side inside and out, but it was Rosalie's persona that allowed me to succeed. She could be firm with deadlines without being aggressive. She could be empathetic to the team's stress while still holding them accountable. She navigated the delicate politics with the client with a grace and diplomacy Caden never could have managed. Aisha was a constant source of support. She would often stay late, too, working on the marketing materials for the project. She'd bring me coffee, her presence a small island of calm in the chaotic storm of work. "You're killing it, you know," she told me one night as we were the last two people left in the office. "I've never seen that team so motivated." "They're a good team," I said, looking over a complex coding schematic. "They just needed a clear direction." "No, it's more than that," she insisted, leaning against my desk. "They respect you. You listen to them." Her gaze was warm and genuine, and for a moment, I let myself bask in it. The line between the performance and reality was dissolving. In the heat of this challenge, I wasn't acting like a leader. I was a leader. Rosalie wasn't a costume anymore. She felt like my skin. We turned the project around. We hit the revised deadline, and the client was thrilled. The day we delivered the final build, the office was buzzing. Mark came over to my desk and clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture so reminiscent of what happened at my old job. But this time, it felt entirely different. "Incredible work, Rosalie," he said, his voice filled with genuine respect. "Truly incredible. You saved our biggest account." The praise felt good. It felt earned. Later that day, Aisha dropped a little cupcake on my desk with a single candle in it. "For the project-saving superhero," she whispered with a wink, looking at the tiny flame. I felt a swell of pride so intense it almost hurt. This success belonged to Rosalie, but as Aisha's warm smile lingered on me, the familiar guilt returned with a vengeance. She was celebrating a person who was a lie. This triumph, this friendship, it was all built on a foundation of sand, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the tide was coming in. A week after the project's successful completion, I received an email from Marissa Jacobs. "Rosalie, could you please stop by my office when you have a moment?" The request was simple, but my stomach twisted into a knot of pure dread. There was no reason given, no context. This is it, I thought. Someone found out. It's over. I walked to her office, each step feeling like I was marching toward my own execution. My hands were clammy, and I could feel a nervous tremor starting in my legs. I straightened my skirt, took a deep breath, and knocked on her door. "Come in," she called. Marissa was sitting behind her desk, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window behind her, creating a halo effect that made her look even more intimidating. She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Please, have a seat." I sat down, my posture rigid. I tried to arrange my face into an expression of calm professionalism, but I was sure my panic was written all over it. She didn't start with small talk. She looked at me, her gaze direct and unnervingly perceptive. It felt like she was looking right through the makeup, the wig, the carefully constructed facade, and seeing the terrified man hiding underneath. "Rosalie," she began, her voice even. "First of all, I want to congratulate you again on the incredible job you did with the Apex project. You exceeded all our expectations. You've proven yourself to be an invaluable asset to this company. Thank you, I managed to say, my voice a tight squeak. She paused, steepling her fingers on the desk. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken words. This was the wind-up. The praise was the cushion before the blow. I also get the feeling, she continued slowly, her eyes never leaving mine, that you're carrying a great deal of weight on your shoulders. I have a sense that there's more to your story than what's on your resume. My blood ran cold. My mind raced, trying to formulate a denial, an excuse, anything. But no words came. I just stared at her, my heart hammering against my ribs. I want to be very clear about something, Marissa said, her tone softening slightly, but losing none of its intensity. Innovate Tech prides itself on being a forward-thinking company. We hired you for your skills, for your intelligence, and for the results you deliver. We believe that our strength comes from our diversity, in all its forms. She paused again, letting the words hang in the air. I don't know what it is you might be hiding, Rosalie, and you don't have to tell me, but I want you to know that this is a safe place. We value authenticity, and we hired Rosalie Chin, the person who turned that project around, the person who leads with grace and strength. That's the person we want working here, whoever that person truly is. I was speechless. She wasn't accusing me. She wasn't firing me. She was offering me a lifeline. She was telling me that she saw something, that she suspected a secret, but that she cared more about the person she had come to know than the details of that secret. She had looked right through the cracks in my performance, not to expose me, but to see who was really there. A tremor started in my hands, the dam I had so carefully constructed inside me. The one holding back months of fear, loneliness, and confusion, began to crack. A single, hot tear escaped and traced a path through my foundation, leaving a pale streak on my cheek. The careful mask of Rosalie was literally and figuratively dissolving. The sight of that one tear was all it took. The crack in the dam shattered, and everything came rushing out. A sob escaped my throat, a ragged, ugly sound that was pure Caden. It was the sound of a man who had been holding his breath for months, for years, and had finally been forced to exhale. I covered my face with my hands, my whole body shaking. The shame was overwhelming, but it was coupled with a strange, profound sense of relief. The performance was over. I'm sorry, I choked out, the words muffled by my hands. I'm so sorry. Marissa didn't say anything for a moment. I heard the sound of her getting up from her desk and walking around to the front. She pulled the other visitor's chair closer to mine and sat down. So we were sitting side by side. She placed a box of tissues on the small table between us. There's nothing to be sorry for, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Just breathe. I took a few shuddering breaths, trying to regain some semblance of control. I grabbed a tissue and wiped at my face, smearing the makeup. It was pointless to hide anymore. The illusion was broken. My name is Caden, I whispered, the name feeling foreign on my lips. My real name is Caden. And then, the whole story poured out of me. I told her everything, the words tumbling over each other in a rush of desperate honesty. I told her about my old job, about the promotion I was passed over for, about feeling invisible and undervalued. I told her about the drunken, bitter night I invented Rosalie Chin as a joke, a way to vent my anger at the world. I told her about the shock of getting the interview, the clumsy first attempts with makeup, the terror of walking outside as a woman for the first time. I described the interview, how Caden's skills and Rosalie's confidence had merged into something new and powerful. I thought it would just be a role I played, I confessed, my voice cracking. A means to an end, a way to get a job that I deserved, but then something happened. It stopped feeling like a costume. At work, being Rosalie, it feels more real than being Caden ever did. She's confident. People listen to her. People like her. Tears were streaming down my face again. I've been so scared every single day. Scared someone would find out and I'd lose everything. But the scariest part is that I think I might be losing myself. I go home, I take off the makeup and the wig, and I look in the mirror, and I don't know who I'm looking at anymore. I don't know if Caden is the real person, or if Rosalie is. I finally ran out of words, completely spent. I sat there, trembling, my face a mess of smeared makeup and tears, fully exposed and vulnerable. I waited for the judgment, for the anger, for the termination of my employment for fraud. I risked a glance at Marissa. She wasn't looking at me with disgust or pity. Her expression was one of profound, thoughtful empathy. She was just listening, really listening. She had seen right through my disguise, and now she was seeing the broken, confused person underneath, and for the first time, I felt like someone was seeing all of me, not just Caden, the overlooked workhorse, not just Rosalie, the polished professional, all of it, the mess, the fear, the confusion, the ambition, the lie, everything. I sat in the heavy silence, my confession hanging in the air between us. I braced myself for the inevitable, the HR speak, the talk of company policy, the polite but firm dismissal. I had lied on my application. I had misrepresented myself. There was no way around it. Marissa leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, a slow, genuine smile spread across her face. It wasn't a smile of pity or amusement. It was a smile of understanding. Caden, she said, testing the name gently. Then she shook her head. No, she corrected herself, her eyes meeting mine with a surprising warmth. Rosalie. It seems to me that Rosalie is the person who's been leading one of our most important teams. Rosalie is the one who saved the Apex account. Rosalie is the one I hired. My head snapped up. I stared at her, uncomprehending. What you did took a tremendous amount of courage. She continued, her voice soft but sure, and probably a fair bit of desperation. The system failed you at your last job. You found a way to work around it, a very unconventional way, I'll grant you. She added with a slight chuckle. But you proved your own point. Your skills were overlooked, and you found a way to make them seen. She stood up, and for a terrifying second, I thought she was going to show me the door. Instead, she did something I never would have expected. She stepped towards me and wrapped her arms around my shoulders in a firm, supportive hug. I was so stunned I couldn't move. I was stiff, awkward, my body still trembling from the emotional release. But as her arms held me, something inside me finally, truly let go. I sagged against her, and a fresh wave of tears came. But this time, they weren't tears of fear or confusion. They were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible relief. We hired you because you are the best person for this job, she said, her voice in my ear. That hasn't changed. We want you to be yourself, your authentic self, and if that self is Rosalie, then we want Rosalie to work here, and we will be here to support you in any way we can. She pulled back, her hands resting on my shoulders for a moment. This journey you're on, it's not going to be easy. But you don't have to do it alone. Not here. She handed me another tissue. Now, she said, her tone shifting back to something more practical, but no less kind. Let's talk about what you need. Do you want to make a formal announcement? Do you want to just keep coming to work as Rosalie and we handle any issues as they arise? Do you need resources? The company has excellent healthcare benefits that cover therapy and gender-affirming care. The choice is yours. We'll follow your lead. I was floored. I had expected rejection, and instead, I was being offered unconditional acceptance and support. She wasn't just tolerating me, she was empowering me. The weight that I had been carrying for months, the crushing burden of the secret, lifted so suddenly, it felt like I could float. I think I want to be Rosalie, I said, the words coming out as a shaky whisper. It was the first time I had ever said it out loud as a statement of fact. A declaration of identity rather than a component of a lie. Saying it felt like coming home. All right, Rosalie, Marissa said, and her smile was radiant. Welcome to Innovate Tech. It's good to have you here. The conversation with Marissa changed everything. It was like a switch had been flipped. The next day, I walked into the office not as Caden pretending to be Rosalie, but simply as Rosalie. The fear of being discovered was gone, replaced by a nascent, fragile sense of peace. The lie was gone. What was left was just me. Marissa was true to her word. There was no grand, dramatic announcement. She simply sent a quiet, company-wide email reminding everyone of Innovate Tech's commitment to an inclusive and respectful workplace, reinforcing policies on chosen names and pronouns. It was subtle, masterful, and it set the tone for the entire office. My immediate team was informed privately, and the message was clear. Rosalie is a valued member of our team, and she is to be treated with respect, period. The reaction from my colleagues was beautifully unremarkable. They just kept calling me Rosalie. There were no awkward questions, no whispers in the hallway. They had known me as Rosalie for months. Nothing had really changed for them. My work was still my work. My leadership was still my leadership. The person they had come to respect was still sitting at her desk, managing her projects. It turned out that the person I was had become far more important to them than the gender I had been assigned at birth. With the support of the company's healthcare plan, I found a therapist who specialized in gender identity. For the first time, I had a space to unpack the tangled mess of feelings I had been suppressing my entire life. I started to understand that Rosalie wasn't an invention. She was an emergence. She was the part of me I had hidden away out of fear and societal pressure. The cross-dressing hadn't been a lie. It had been an experiment in truth. A few months later, I made the decision to start hormone replacement therapy. It was a step into a new, unknown world, both exciting and terrifying. The changes were subtle at first. My skin started to feel softer. My sense of smell became more acute. The most profound change, however, was emotional. I felt things with a new intensity. I cried at a sappy commercial. I felt a joy so sharp and pure over a beautiful sunset that it took my breath away. My emotional landscape, once a flat, muted terrain, was exploding into vibrant color. I was feeling things Caden had never allowed himself to feel. My body was slowly changing, aligning itself more closely with the person I was inside. It was a second puberty, awkward and strange at times, but it felt right. It felt like coming home to myself. I would look in the mirror in the morning, and the face looking back was starting to feel less like a construction and more like a reflection. The lines were softening. the features subtly shifting. I wasn't Caden anymore. I wasn't pretending to be Rosalie. I simply was Rosalie. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. My friendship with Aisha deepened, with the burden of my secret gone. I could finally relax around her. I no longer had to deflect her questions about my weekend or invent a vague past. I could be present with her, genuine. Our conversations over coffee became the highlight of my day. One Thursday evening, after a long and grueling week, we were the last two to leave the office again. "You look tired," she said, her expression soft with concern. "Let me buy you a glass of wine, my treat, as a thank you for not letting me go insane over those marketing proofs today." My old panic would have screamed no, but that was gone now. "I'd like that," I said with a real smile. We went to a quiet little wine bar a few blocks from the office. The atmosphere was cozy and warm, a stark contrast to the sterile corporate world we had just left. We found a small table in a corner, and the easy conversation flowed as we sipped our drinks. After a while, a comfortable silence fell between us. Aisha swirled the red wine in her glass, her gaze thoughtful. "You know," she said, her voice low. "You seem different lately, happier, lighter." I felt a small flutter of nervousness, but it wasn't the old, familiar terror. "A lot has changed," I said simply. She looked up, her dark eyes meeting mine. "I heard about Marissa's email and, well, people talk. I just want you to know, it doesn't change anything. You're still Rosalie, my friend who has an amazing eye for fashion and who is a total rock star at her job." A wave of warmth washed over me. "Thank you, Aisha. That means more to me than you know." She reached across the table and gently placed her hand over mine. Her touch was warm, and it sent a little jolt up my arm. It wasn't a gesture of pity. It was one of simple, profound connection. "So," she said, a playful glint in her eyes, "that big secret of yours? Not so secret anymore, huh?" I laughed, a real, unburdened laugh. "No, I guess not." "Good," she said, her thumb stroking the back of my hand. "Secrets are exhausting." Her gaze was direct, and it held something more than just friendship. It was a look of genuine admiration, of curiosity, and maybe something more. The air between us shifted, became charged with a new, unspoken energy. Her touch lingered on my hand. A silent question. The low light of the bar. The scent of wine. The warmth of her hand, it all combined into a moment of perfect, sweet intimacy. I didn't know where this was going. I didn't know what it meant. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the future. I just savored the moment, the simple, beautiful feeling of being seen and being accepted for exactly who I was. And as I looked at Aisha's smiling face, I felt the promise of a new chapter beginning, one that was filled not with fear and deception, but with honesty, warmth, and the sweet, dizzying possibility of joy. A year can change everything. 1 year after my tearful confession in Marissa's office, I walked into Innovate Tech a different woman. It wasn't just the hormones that had softened the angles of my face and body, or the longer, natural hair that had replaced the wig. The change was deeper. It was in the way I walked, the way I held my head high. The constant thrum of anxiety that had been the background music of my life for so long had faded, replaced by a quiet, steady confidence. I was no longer just Rosalie Chen, the project manager who had saved a big account. I was Rosalie Chen, the senior project manager, leading the company's most innovative new development team. My success hadn't been a fluke, freed from the cognitive load of maintaining a double life. All my energy went into my work, and it showed. I was creative, decisive, and empathetic, a leader my team trusted and respected. One Tuesday morning, I was summoned to the top floor. The CEO's office. Eleanor Vaughn was a legend in the tech world. A sharp, no-nonsense woman who had built Innovate Tech from the ground up. I'd only ever seen her in company-wide town halls. Her office was spacious and flooded with light, with a panoramic view of the city. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Rosalie," she said, gesturing for me to sit. "I've been following your career here very closely. Your work on the Apex project was a turning point for the company. Your work since then has been consistently brilliant." "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, my heart beating a little faster. "Marissa Jacobs has also told me a great deal about you," she continued, her gaze direct and piercing. "She told me about your courage, your authenticity." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Innovate Tech is growing. We're becoming a major player in this industry. And I believe that what makes us strong isn't just our code or our products, it's our people, our culture. That's why I'm creating a new executive-level initiative, a program focused on diversity and inclusion, not just as a set of HR checkboxes, but as a core driver of our innovation." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I need someone to lead it, someone who understands, from personal experience, the importance of creating a workplace where everyone can bring their whole, authentic self to work. I want that person to be you." I was stunned into silence. Me, a year ago, I was a man in a wig, terrified of being exposed as a fraud. Now, the CEO of the company was asking me to lead its entire diversity and inclusion program. It was a role that went far beyond project timelines and budgets. It was a role that could shape the very soul of the company. "This is an opportunity to make a real, lasting impact, Rosalie," Eleanor said, "to ensure that no one with talent ever feels invisible at this company again." The word invisible hit me like a physical blow. That was the word that had defined Caden's existence for so long. To be given the chance to build a culture that fought against that very feeling, it was more than a job. It was a calling. "Yes," I said, my voice filled with a conviction I had never felt before. "I'll do it." 6 months into my new role, I stood on a stage, a spotlight warm on my face. In front of me were hundreds of Innovate Tech employees gathered for our annual company conference. A year ago, the thought of this would have sent me into a full-blown panic attack. Today, I felt calm. My presentation wasn't about code or quarterly earnings. It was about my story. With a slideshow of simple, powerful images behind me, I told them everything. I told them about Caden, about his frustration and his feeling of being invisible. I told them about the desperate, drunken creation of Rosalie. I told them about the fear, the loneliness, and the eventual beautiful acceptance I found at this company. "Rosalie wasn't a lie," I said, my voice echoing in the auditorium. "She was a truth I hadn't had the courage to live yet. This company, the people in this room, you gave me the safety to not just be a successful employee, but to be my authentic self. My goal, in this new role, is to make that safety, that opportunity for authenticity, a reality for every single person who walks through our doors." When I finished, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then, the room erupted in applause. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was a standing ovation, a thunderous wave of support and affirmation that washed over me. As I looked out at the faces in the crowd, I saw people wiping away tears. I saw smiles of genuine admiration. In the weeks that followed, my office became a safe haven. Young employees, grappling with their own identities, whether it was their sexuality, their ethnicity, their neurodiversity, would come to talk to me. They saw me not as a corporate executive, but as someone who understood what it felt like to hide a part of yourself. They didn't just see a success story. They saw a fellow traveler. I became a mentor, a confidant, an advocate. The work was challenging and deeply rewarding. I was no longer just managing projects. I was helping to build a better, more human-centered world, one employee at a time. My life had found a purpose I could never have imagined. The boardroom was filled with an intimidating collection of venture capitalists and investors. This was a crucial meeting to secure the next round of funding for a major expansion. Eleanor led the meeting, but she had asked me to present the section on company culture and its direct impact on innovation and employee retention, my D&I program. I walked into the room, no longer the terrified woman in sensible heels, but a confident executive in a stylish, deep red power dress. My presentation was crisp, backed by data and infused with the passion of my own experience. I spoke of psychological safety, of the power of diverse perspectives, of how our commitment to inclusion was our greatest competitive advantage. As I spoke, I noticed one woman at the far end of the table watching me with a particular intensity. She was one of the lead investors, a powerful, impeccably dressed woman known for her sharp mind and even sharper questions. But her gaze wasn't interrogating me. It was a look of deep, focused interest, a look that went beyond the numbers on my slides. It was a look of recognition, of admiration. When the Q&A session began, her hand was the first to go up. "Ms. Chen," she said, her voice clear and commanding. That was one of the most compelling arguments for the business case of diversity I have ever heard. You spoke with remarkable authority. She paused, her eyes meeting mine across the long, polished table. You are clearly a formidable woman, coming from her. The word formidable was the highest form of compliment. In that moment, the journey of the past 2 years coalesced. The bitterness of Caden, the terror of my first steps in heels, the loneliness of the double life, the relief of acceptance, and the joy of living my truth. It had all led me here, to this boardroom, being seen not as a fraud, not as a curiosity, but as a powerful, capable woman. The meeting was a resounding success. We secured the funding as people were packing up their briefcases. The investor approached me. "Your story is going to change things, Rosalie," she said quietly, a knowing smile on her face. "Not just at this company," I smiled back. A genuine, radiant smile that reached my eyes. The promise of a new chapter hung in the air. Not just for me, but for the work that lay ahead. The charade was long over. The performance had ended. This was just my life now, authentic and unfolding. Rosalie Chen was no longer pretending. She was just beginning.